Coming up, the trades that, quote, just make sense as the season looms. A few different factors that involve the New York Football Giants, including a quarterback, a wide receiver, and a position of need inside linebacker. We break it all down next. Heyo, it's the OGP, the One Giant podcast, where, of course, we are your host over here, Adam Armbrecht, also breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast with my boy, Doug Norrie. And over there, yonder, nay, is the healthy, wealthy, and wise season generational ticket holder, Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
Just trying to stay cool, Adam. It is so hot out right now. I can't even believe it. They had a heat wave over in Europe. They couldn't play some soccer matches. It's crazy right now. But it is the summertime, my friend.
Speaking of European, maybe that's the way we take this. You know, a lot of nude beaches over there. Maybe we kind of go nude podcasting. I'm not saying it's going to be great for the YouTube viewer, but there are options out there. Although air conditioning would also be option two. I think number one is nude. Number two, just turn on the AC.
Yeah, just get 70 degrees inside your house in the shade. Yeah, that might be the better option for us, I think.
We'll try your way, and then but always in the back pocket, back of your mind, nude OGP. Could be fun. Anyway, bottom line is, as the offseason progresses and training camp will look to get underway next week, we'll get some real sample sizes here. We understand, by the way, it's like once you hit August, I feel like some people have said that, when training camp and the rookies report, you start to, that means the season is close. For me, it's August. Once it's August, it means that you're getting real football, real practices, real indications. We did the other day talking about the depth chart, right? Like you start to really get a sense of where your team is headed and what's looming, and we can start to think about the regular season. So that's we're on the cusp of it. I don't follow those national narratives. While we're not following national narratives, Andy, there is a Bleacher Report that came out talking about trades that just make sense around the NFL ahead of the season. Handful of different ones here to go through. This came care of, just to make sure we give credit where credit is due, Kristopher Knox for Bleacher Report. There's 5 names there amongst them. Obviously, we're going to be talking about a linebacker at the top. We also have a wide receiver in Darius Slayton. But then the interesting one that we talked about the other day, and that's one Jimmy G. We start the conversation there, Andy, because this was not about Jimmy G to the New York Football Giants. This was about him going to the Seattle Seahawks. And before we tie it back into the continued conversation that connects him to the New York Football Giants, Seattle in a lot of ways maybe does make sense to me far more than where the Giants stand. Are you on the same page with that? Because I can get what Seattle might want to do over the next 3-4 years.
So this continues to be a thing online, and I just don't understand it. So former Jets general manager Mike Tannenbaum came out and he echoed what David Carr said previously and was like, look out for the Giants going for Jimmy Garoppolo. I think, they didn't pick up the 50-year option on Daniel Jones. They're still searching for their quarterback, and Jimmy G can be that guy. And Adam, I just don't understand. It's like maybe they're just so unaware of what the Giants situation actually is that they just throw these things out because the Giants don't have a franchise quarterback that like Jimmy Garoppolo, quote unquote, makes sense. But like none of it actually makes sense. Jimmy Garoppolo is coming off a shoulder injury. He's 30 years old. He costs $27 million in a cap hit. The Giants had to release James Bradbury because they have no cap space. Why on earth are the Giants continually mentioned here? Like, yes, the Seattle piece that you're saying, I think that just makes sense. But why? Bill Barnwell did an article about what a Jimmy Garoppolo trade to the Giants would be, who I respect and like the work that he does. Mike Tannenbaum is coming out and saying it. David Carr, who was a Giant at one point. Like, let me ask you a question. Why do you think the Jimmy Garoppolo to the Giants thing is gaining traction in the media?
Well, and just to for context, Knox put in the Baker Mayfield trade. Obviously, the numbers in the background, even Seattle only has a little bit under 16 million, so they wouldn't be able to take on the full load of that contract. Here's what I think, and this does speak to the Giants situation and in general for Jimmy G. I do think, and we talked about this the other day when we initially discussed this, that Jimmy G has more, like Garoppolo has more value than I think maybe we are allowing there to be. We look at his numbers and we say, hey, the stats, okay, they're pretty good. Age factor, maybe injury factor as well. But in today's NFL, and for a quarterback who wasn't starting early in his career, like Garoppolo has another 7-8 years of football in him. And I think winning football, as far as from a GM and from an organizational standpoint, teams do look at that and say, this guy just know how to help teams win football games. Whatever the ceiling of that is, he is capable of that. So I think maybe we are downplaying his value to teams around the league a little bit more than we should. That being the case, as we talk about the Giants situation, I don't know why it's getting so much traction for a very specific reason. And this has been brought up in these national discussions, but if the Giants did not have Tyrod Taylor, I might look at it differently, because you could say, okay, let's follow Adam's, breadcrumb trail here. The Giants don't pick up the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones. Some people say, oh, well, this is best foot forward for him. He has every opportunity to still be the Giants franchise quarterback. Maybe Joe Schoen and the new coaching staff are saying, no, he doesn't. There is no opportunity for him to be the franchise guy. It just made more sense for us financially and in the short term to say, hey, trading you isn't going to be an option. You have no value. We're not going to take the dead cap hit. Play it out. We don't care what the results are. We don't think that you can be a franchise guy. And next year, we're going to be drafting one of those young rookies. And that's why we have Tyrod Taylor in place. In that general scenario, you could say, okay, is Jimmy G a viable starter for the Giants over the next 3, 4, 5 seasons, an extension, etc.? Maybe. I don't think it makes sense from the where does this team going in the big picture, but I understand if you take away 3 or 4 tenets of why it doesn't make sense, why you could get there, right? The first cornerstone has to be that you don't think Daniel Jones is the franchise guy. The second one is, then why did you bring on in Tyrod Taylor? Shy of saying an insurance policy. And I'll let you respond to any of those points, but I do have a secondary, comment around it that I could make.
So my answer to all this, and I've been thinking about this for a while, is Don Yee. Does that name mean anything to you?
Nope.
Okay. Don Yee is the agent for Jimmy Garoppolo. He is also the agent for Tom Brady. He's an agent to a lot of big-time quarterbacks. And what I think is happening now is Don Yee is looking, he knows that Jimmy Garoppolo is not part of the plan in San Francisco. Like,
Sure.
they clear as day did that when they traded all those assets to get Trey Lance. Don Yee is looking around the landscape of the NFL, and he's saying, if a team were to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo tomorrow, what are the teams that Jimmy would be able to start for?
Sure.
Like that's what he's thinking. And so we talk about the trades that just make sense. There is a trade that just makes sense to Seattle because they've got Drew Lock and Geno Smith. I think we can all agree that Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than either of those two. The problem that they have is that that's in division. And I don't see San Francisco saying, yeah, we're going to eat a bunch of money and make a division rival better to get like a 5th-round pick back. Like that makes no sense. So if that doesn't work, even though it's the most logical, where else could Jimmy Garoppolo go? There aren't that many spots. So to me, this is Don Yee going to Mike Tannenbaum, going to David Carr and saying, guys, you know where he would fit great? He would fit great in New York. And I think you guys should really think about that one a little bit more. And maybe just throw that out there as an idea, because literally, if you look around the league, where else would Jimmy Garoppolo start now that Baker Mayfield's in Carolina? Sounds like Deshaun Watson isn't going to get suspended for the whole season. Like, where can Jimmy G go tomorrow where he is locked in as the starter?
Yeah, and I think it's funny too, because you talk about like a year from now, which obviously it's the final year of his contract, but a year from now, Carolina could be on the table for Jimmy G as a free agent, right? Like a lot of teams could be open for him a year from now.
The Giants could be.
Yeah, 100%. And the funny thing is too, I will say, I'll push back on it. I think it makes sense. There's a logic to it. You're trying to hype up the market for your guy, but if that's the case, they're like, why not the Houston Texans as well? And that's a team that gets universally pushed away. Now they have a young quarterback who, they drafted him a little bit later, a little bit of spark here. But if you're putting it on the same footing as, where are the franchises? The Giants and the Texans are in a similar boat of like, hey, looks like they're going to be bad. We'll could be the starter day one. Now, organizationally, this comes back to my narrative around the Giants. They seem to like their guy and they want to go forward with him. This is where I think take the spectrum. Information can be as well that the Giants are not nearly as committed, even in the short term, to Daniel Jones as some people may think. I don't see this happening for the Giants. It doesn't make sense for a myriad of reasons, but it will be fascinating to see what happens with Jimmy G in the short term. The other thing I'll actually ask you too, before we move off of this, which is just fascinating, I also think that like San Francisco gave up a ton of capital to go get Trey Lance, and yet he is being looked at and people are saying, we don't know. Like, we don't know what's going to happen here. And if you're the 49ers, we talk about it, how it tracks in the locker room, what it means for other players, whatever. I think the 49ers are also like, if the right opportunity comes and we don't have to eat any money, that's great. I don't think the 49ers are concerned about maybe saying, what if we go into the regular season and he's still on our roster and we see how the league plays out? Because if Trey Lance looks like a disaster early and can't, doesn't look like he's taking the progressive steps forward, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the 49ers go, we made a mistake and we can just bring back Jimmy G and try to reset ourselves here, because they still have a lot of veteran talent. Like, they still think that they are ready to compete now for the playoffs, in the playoffs. And that's a fine line you're walking with a young player like Trey Lance if he doesn't turn out to be the guy for them.
I disagree with you wholeheartedly on that. The reason why I disagree with you is because John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan both drafted Trey Lance. They have to make Trey Lance work no matter what. They can't.
I get it. I just think it'd be folly if you go pull pot, and then where are you a year from now if Trey Lance isn't the guy?
You'd be in a better situation if you trade Jimmy Garoppolo, let that ship sail so that Trey Lance isn't constantly looking over his shoulder after one interception, and you'd be better suited to go get Gardner Minshew from the Philadelphia Eagles for a late round pick, or take Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, whoever doesn't win the job in Carolina.
Oh, no way.
No
way are you, though. No way. No way would you be, like, just objectively, no way are you a team that's better off, and any team, no team is better off with Baker Mayfield, with Sam Darnold, with Gardner Minshew than they would be with Jimmy Garoppolo. Whatever Jimmy Garoppolo is or is not, you're better off having him as the other option as opposed to one of those guys. Do you not agree with that?
I disagree for where the 49ers are. I'm not talking about in a vacuum who's a better quarterback. What I'm saying is, like,
But a year from now, Trey Lance doesn't work out. Like, a year from now, it doesn't look like it's good enough, and he's not going to be the franchise guy. You would rather have one of those other quarterbacks than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense. The 49ers know that they can win games with Jimmy Garoppolo. All these other quarterbacks in Cleveland, Baker Mayfield, the reason why he's gone is because even with all of that talent, he still wasn't able to consistently win football games for them. Sam Darnold is losing his job to Baker Mayfield in Carolina after losing his job with the New York Jets. Why would a year from now, if their young rookie quarterback prospect that they drafted didn't work out, why would the 49ers, a team that thinks that they're built to win now, say, we're going to go get any number of quarterback whose track record shows they aren't winners, as opposed to the guy who's shown he can win and with their team and with all the talent that they have there?
Because they've already done it once by trading $1 million assets to go up and get Trey Lance. They already said that Jimmy Garoppolo is not their guy. They see all the stats that you do about how much Jimmy Garoppolo wins, and they still, in spite of all that, said, we do not want this guy as our starting quarterback anymore. So
I disagree with you.
I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about what they are saying.
But I disagree on that front too, because I think that the San Francisco 49ers were trying to do the thing where old school, we have a veteran quarterback and we're going to draft a young talent, right? And we're going to look to build him up. If Jimmy G doesn't suffer the injury, I think that this timeline looks a little bit different. I think you go into this year saying, if Trey Lance is ready to take over, great, but we have this veteran quarterback and he's been healthy, right? Like, we would just say, we'll see. If Jimmy Garoppolo walks off into the sunset after one more year of free agency and gets a big deal, fine, because that's what our process was here. Like, I think where Jimmy G is from an injury standpoint was as big a factor. I know they gave up all the capital, but this is interesting. It's just like a part of the national narrative around football is once you draft the guy, he's got to be starting. And you and I have talked about this even with Daniel Jones, of if Daniel Jones proved it this year and it worked out, you'd be saying, okay, so we get another decade plus of a starting NFL quarterback. I think sometimes those timelines, that's the narrative is, they get so truncated. If you draft a guy high in the first round, he has to be starting for you his rookie year. At the worst, he has to be the starter by year number 2. And it's like, does he? I know the teams win on rookie contracts for quarterbacks, but those timelines get, they get a little wonky when you start to be the way that it's done. There have obviously been, going back a ways, instances where quarterbacks that sit to start their careers actually end up benefiting themselves and the franchise in the long picture.
I agree with all of that, but you brought up a great point about Jimmy Garoppolo. He is injury prone. They cannot rely or trust him because they don't think he's going to stay healthy. He's gotten injured basically every single year of his career. And so they need something more reliable, even if it's 90% of what Jimmy G is. And thus that's where Trey Lance comes in.
Fair enough. Let's get ourselves off of this conversation because gosh darn it, there's other things to talk about here. Like, and this is why it's hard. This happened the other day. I said we don't really talk about Jimmy G too much, but then you get into the weeds on it and it's just too intoxicating.
I know he's polarizing. That's the problem because everyone keeps bringing him up for the Giants and he makes no sense. And then we go into this diatribe of who Jimmy Garoppolo is. It's just
well, by the way, the good part is we're really just talking about Jimmy. Like you and I both agree, there's no reason why we should be talking about him with the Giants. We're talking about him with everything else that could possibly happen.
Yeah, it's crazy. It keeps getting brought up. Jimmy G to the Giants. Oh, this has got some legs. What a potential Jimmy G trade would look like for the Giants. You're like, what are we talking about here? So Adam, please move us. Please move us past Jimmy G and maybe more Giant specific fodder here.
You better believe it. So amongst Knox's article, one of the automatic must happen just makes too much sense is Darius Slayton for a 7th round pick to the Chicago Bears. Obviously they acquired N'Keal Harry out there from the New England Patriots. They have some options, another young quarterback trying to surround him with talent. We know it's the final year of his rookie deal for Darius Slayton. It's a low cap hit. We know what the Giants have, and they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. You first on this one. I mean, you can talk about whether I think it makes sense for Chicago to bring in a guy like this, take a low-level flyer. Does it make sense for the Giants? Does it make sense for both sides?
It does, but I say it with hesitation because I'm saying, what is the motivation for the Giants to do this deal? Like, what is the reason why they're doing it? Do we need the cap space? Do we need the $2.5 million the Giants will save because we need to sign people across the season? If you're telling me that money is integral to what the Giants need to do, then this makes all the sense in the world. But I don't think it makes sense if you're just saying, we don't want Darius Slayton here anymore, and we're just going to ship him out for the last pick in the draft. Like, that to me makes no sense. So the question is more, Adam, like, what is the motivating reason for the Giants to move off of him?
And that's what I think, because to me, if you're telling me a 7th round pick, which could be mid to upper half of the 7th round, the Chicago Bears, depending on what their season looks like, could get a little bit worse if you're giving them another talented weapon potentially. For a 7th round pick, if I don't need to jettison him for the cap space, I'll just keep Darius Slayton for a year, knowing that he can walk into free agency because there still is the possibility of what his value could be. And I think he's still a nice option to have. We talked about this previously. Kadarius Toney could be on the outside. We have Kenny Galladay. We have Wan'Dale Robinson, Daniel Bellinger, now at tight end, right? Like we know all these weapons. And there's just a world where, again, if we're talking about so many other players for the Giants that deserve this fresh start in the new regime, why doesn't Darius Slayton deserve that too, right? If this guy goes out and catches a little bit more than 50% of his balls, which, by the way, a speed, larger, stretch the field wide receiver, that's usually a lot of times what the numbers look like. 50% or a little bit better is kind of that target. If he can catch some big balls and get some touchdowns and help stretch the field and open things up, I can be talking about in the offseason where the Giants bring him back on a reasonable second contract to be the 3rd, 4th weapon inside of this, knowing that Kenny Galladay's exit could be coming down the road. Like, I just don't know, understanding it's the final year, why, outside of financial reasons, why would the Giants say, oh, 7th round pick, great, we don't need this player? I think you want to keep every weapon possible at your disposal.
I think the other reason why, even though I may not agree with it, is that you have other guys in the building that give you 95 cents on the dollar in terms of what Darius Slayton brings. So do you like what Richie James brings? Obviously, Madden is a small indicator, but they basically have the same Madden rating, right? Like they kind of look at Richie James and Darius Slayton as the similar type of player. The Giants have a couple of other guys that are interesting that maybe they want to get looks at in their building. We talk about wanting to make sure Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney get on the field at the same time. They have Colin Johnson, who has that big body type of receiver on the outside as well. CJ Board is still floating around a little bit. The Giants have a lot of depth that seems like it's a bunch of guys there. So that makes sense. But what I will say is, if you're trading Darius Slayton for a 7th round pick just because you want the asset back, like that to me would be the one thing that I just don't understand, because you have 2 opportunities with Darius Slayton. One is if he performs well, but the Giants aren't doing good, you could trade him during the year for a team that has an injury where someone goes down, probably can get more than a 7th rounder for him. And the second piece is if he ends up playing really well, but not good enough to come back on another contract because you have money invested already, when he leaves, if he signs a multi-year deal, you may get a compensatory pick back for Darius Slayton, which will be more valuable than a 7th round pick itself. So like, if he does well,
Yeah.
the Giants have multiple options available to them in terms of getting capital back for Darius Slayton.
No, 100%. And what if this guy over the, you mentioned it ahead of the deadline, what if he's catching 2 to 3 balls a game for 35 to 55 yards, maybe one big play, right? And has a touchdown or two? That over the first 6 weeks is going to get you better value on the market, or just remind you about what his value can be for you. So I agree with you there. The last one we want to get to here, I'm just going to touch on one that I don't appreciate, even though it may make sense. Kareem Hunt to the LA Rams. This was for Browns getting a 3rd round pick out of this to send Kareem Hunt. Obviously, we know where the Rams are. They're looking to run this thing back. They got a lot of veteran talent. They're obviously a really strong team. And there's actually something about this that I do want to touch on. Just on the surface, I'm just like, why do they deserve to get better? Why do the Rams deserve to get better? I don't like this trade just because I think it makes a Super Bowl winning team better, and that's not something that should be allowed. It just shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah. I mean, short and sweet for me is it makes no sense for them. Like they have Cam Akers, they have Darrell Henderson, and they just drafted Kyron Williams from Notre Dame. Like they have a nice running back room. It's perfectly fine. There's no reason for them to do this whatsoever.
Yeah, and so the one thing I did want to mention about them, though, is just something that I heard over this offseason, which was the way that the Rams were able to go and get, obviously,
Allen Robinson.
I mean him, but if I could get to Matt Stafford, I did it.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? We leave it in. We don't take that out as my brain completely shuts down. So for some reason, Bradford was the only name that I could get in my mind.
Oh,
I
you
was
mean
like,
the Super Bowl winning quarterback from last year? You don't remember his name? Yeah. Just a small addition that they made. Yeah.
But they went and acquired and they spend this money and they bring back Donald and they re-up his contract. A big thing philosophically that the Rams have done is they've gone ahead and they've said, our 3rd and 4th round draft picks, they got to play. That's how you keep this high priced veteran talent. And then you supplement them with guys where you go, listen, you're cheap. You got to get out there. You need to be contributors. And they had that on the defensive side of the ball, especially at that linebacker position. So it's just interesting to think about when you say, hey, you got to balance the books. You have high priced talent. You're going to end up sacrificing. But if you draft and scout well, as we hope Joe Shane and the Giants are going to do, that's how you can move the needle and have really big price tag players and still be successful without depleting the rest of your roster. So fascinating just approach to the way they have been managed to spend big money and still be competitive at the highest possible level, something that other franchises have certainly struggled to do. That being the case, though, we can always touch back to that. Deion Jones from the Atlanta Falcons, 7-year veteran. Knox talks about him, Kristopher Knox, in the Bleacher Report article, to the Cowboys for a 6th round pick. Now, there's financial reasons why this is on the table, obviously. When you think about what his measurables are, you're talking about a guy that's playing there at 6'1", 230. To me, I look at this linebacking core, and I agree with you. I don't want to take away any reps on. Talked about who's going to be playing alongside Blake Martinez. How confident are we in Blake Martinez to stay healthy? And I'll even tie it into kind of this global picture. If someone comes knocking for the services of Darius Slayton and you can get $2.5 million off the books, and if someone came knocking for the services of Julian Love and you can get off some of that money there as well, you're going to have to do some other things, obviously, as we know, to make this all work. But bringing in a player who, just in case you're wondering, has had since coming to the league in 2016 his worst year, which is where he only played 6 games, still had 53 total tackles in a 6-game season. Every other year where he's played every single game, 108, 138, 110, 106, 137 total tackles. He had 50 assists last year for that team. He also came up with, he has 11 career interceptions. Like, at this age range, I actually, and by the way, you can say go into it. Maybe he walks away and he ends up on the free agent market through some form or fashion here from Atlanta. Like, he actually seems like a guy that in the next 3 or 4 year window for the Giants, he's the right age to spend a bit of money on and say, for the next 4 years, we have a veteran linebacker, versatile underneath Wink Martindale, that can be a nice complementary piece, especially if we make the assumption that Blake Martinez is not going to be here for the long term.
Well, the other question is then, Adam, if he's going to play on the inside, either next to Blake Martinez or he's a replacement for Blake Martinez, are you concerned about him taking snaps and reps away from guys like McFadden or Beavers and not being able to see if a guy that you drafted that's young and cheap might be able to get into the mix at that inside linebacker position.
Listen, that's obviously going to be a factor there, but Tay Crowder, what are we talking about, right? And then a year from now, O'Shane Ximines, assuming that he stays on this roster, that's another spot where you can save a little bit of money. I think, yes, I obviously want these guys to be playing, but if we fast forward a year, and even over the course of this season, if we say that Blake Martinez and Tay Crowder and O'Shane Ximines, if those three guys are gone, well, all of a sudden McFadden and Beavers and Ojulari and a guy like Jones and, player X in the draft or free agent, like, you're going to have this opportunity. We talked about Darian Beavers. Where's he lining up? Is he so versatile that you can put him on the outside, on the inside? As long as those players are getting their reps, I'm fine with bringing in other talent. And I think, like, I'll just frame this as we'll wrap this one up here. I frame it in the sense of, like, I don't want the 33-year-old Joe Hayden cornerback on this roster. It doesn't make any sense. But I've always said 26, 27 to 28 and 29 years old, that's the age range where the veteran talent matters, and you can really help elevate this team overall. And I think, listen, I don't know if the money would work or if it totally would make sense for the Giants, but I get the idea of sniffing around something like this. And if it means global perspective, how do you feel about McFadden and Beavers in the short term? Are they automatically players that you believe can get reps this year, or do you want to bring them along gradually? At that point, going and making a move like this could make a lot of sense, just to have, again, inside, outside, versatile player along with Blake Martinez, and say no pressure on some of the young talent. I'm usually not on this side of it, but I am intrigued about what that could look like for the Giants, especially with Wink Martindale.
Adam, at the end of the day, my friend, these types of trades, Darius Slayton going out is a possibility. Bringing in or trading for some type of inside linebacker to give us a little bit more security are two things I think can happen and have a decent chance. As we talked about before, I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is in the cards for the Giants. I hope he's not in the cards for the Giants, but there will be a couple of these different moves that happen over the next month or so as Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll continue to tinker and retool with exactly what team they want to be on the field against Tennessee Titans week 1.
You better believe it, buddy. You know that you can get us over on YouTube and obviously wherever you get your podcast needs fulfilled. We are going to be breaking down some of these options. Who are guys that could just straight be cut that the Giants could bring in as opposed to trading for someone else to help flesh out either side of the football for them? We know we got full training camp coming up next week. Enjoy the weekend, friends. We'll be back in. And as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.